Hello, and welcome to my official Hanzo guide. So, you want to learn how to be a true Hanzo expert. While it may take a lot of time and experience to become a true Dragon Master, this video will provide you with the tools and assets needed to learn everything there is to know about the former Shimada clan leader. So sit back, open a nice cold beverage, and get ready to delve deep into the origins, gameplay statistics, and strategies for Hanzo. We'll start off with some basic in-game information as well as some origin details. Hanzo Shimada is a 38-year-old Japanese man who led the Shimada clan after inheriting it from his father's death. His occupation is an assassin, or mercenary, and is related to another member of the Overwatch cast, Genji being his brother. In Overwatch, Hanzo has a maximum of 200 HP. This is the standard health for most heroes in the game and is no exception here. He is in the defensive class with a subclass of Sniper. This means that Hanzo has the potential to excel while shooting down targets moving towards his location at a distance. While it may be obvious, it's still good to add that he doesn't come with any base armor or shields. Hanzo's weapon of choice is the Stormbow. It does 125 points of damage when fully drawn back or cocked and does 29 damage when fired instantaneously. Headshots grant you double damage regardless if the shot is charged or not. The arrows fire from the bow in an arched projectile manner, meaning that the arrows have travel distance before reaching their intended destination. While the arch isn't significant or hard to deal with at a close to medium range, its velocity falloff can be hard to predict at extreme distances. Combined with the projectile feature, it can be fairly difficult to land your arrows on enemies if they're further away than your niche range. The rate of fire for the Stormbow is 0.5 seconds in between shots and while you're charging the bow, meaning that there is a 1 second delay between each fully charged arrow if your timing is perfect. Your move speed is also decreased while charging up your shot, so make sure you're in a good position before doing so. There is no ammo clip with the Stormbow, meaning you can fire a continuous barrage of arrows as long as you like without the need to reload a magazine, or a quiver in this case. Hanzo's first ability in his kit is the Sonic Arrow. This arrow sticks to any surface fired upon and provides its given effects. Because it's launched from the Stormbow, it has the same damage and range characteristics as regular arrows. The key feature of this arrow type is that it provides a sonar tracker that shows enemies in a bright red overlay for 10 seconds who walk into the ability's radius. This red overlay shows up on the screen through any type of wall, building, shield, or cover. The Sonic Arrow has a very long cooldown of 20 seconds, making it one of the longest in the entire game. The trade-off for this is that it does last 10 seconds like I mentioned before, and on top of that, it provides the red overlay on enemies not just for you but for your entire team, making the Sonic Arrow a great team-oriented ability that can really give your squad an advantage in fights. The AoE or area of effect for the Sonic Arrow is 10 meters, giving it enough room to show enemies surrounding key choke points on most maps. Another quick tip is that while enemies cannot see the Sonic Arrow's location, some heroes can dispel its effects by using certain abilities. An example of this is Reaper going into Wraith form or Tracer traveling back in time with her recall ability. So if you want to receive the full effect of the ability, make sure that you try not to stick the Sonic Arrow on those heroes if at all possible. Hanzo's most notorious ability is the Scatter Arrow, a potentially devastating split arrow shot that deals 75 damage per arrow hit. There are a total of 6 arrows fired, including the original arrow shot before hitting a surface and splitting into the other 5. There are no headshot bonuses included on the Scatter Arrows, however the first arrow fired can headshot before hitting a surface. The first arrow fired performs like a regular arrow, having an arched projectile movement towards the target. The Scatter Arrow has a 10-second cooldown, which isn't as bad as the Sonic Arrow, but can still leave you vulnerable since it's your only somewhat reliable close-ranged attack. When the arrow splits into the other 5 projectiles, they acquire a ricochet feature that allows the arrows to bounce off any surface up to 3 times before hitting an enemy. Try to position the Scatter Arrow to bounce off the floor up into the enemy's face. This will greatly increase your chances of landing more of the shots and therefore critically wounding or even wiping them out entirely. Another good strategy to pick up while using this ability is to fire it off walls into a secured area. An example of this would be shooting the scatter arrow into the main building within the objective area on the Nepal map Sanctum. The ricochet feature allows for a considerable chance to kill enemies who are perhaps trying to escape the main team fight due to low health. Hanzo's ultimate, Dragon Strike, is a great area control ability that will also likely score some important kills. It does 200 damage per second, dealing a higher amount the closer you are to the center of the two dragons. The initial arrow is able to headshot enemies, but it splits very quickly after being fired, so you shouldn't have to worry about this. Unlike the rest of his abilities, Dragon Strike is fired as a linear projectile, meaning it continuously moves forward after being shot. The dragons themselves have an infinite travel distance. They'll move all the way throughout the map. This ultimate has 1200 charge required and has a 1.5 second timing delay before firing. The AoE for the dragons are 4 meters, giving it enough room to clear out a small area on the map, preferably an objective. With all this being said, the Dragon Strike is pretty easy to avoid as long as you're able to hear Hanzo shout his infamous voice line beforehand. Hanzo also has a passive ability to wall climb, and it's not really that important. You can use it to get out of the way, out of line of fire or something, or get a positional advantage over your enemy. It's pretty straightforward, not much else to be said about that. Now let's go over some general strategies that can help you perform better while using Hanzo. The first thing that you should always be trying to do while playing Hanzo is flanking your enemies. It's easier to aim your shots when people aren't constantly shooting back at you, and on top of this, it grants you a great opportunity to take out support heroes in the back lines. This is especially great to do with Hanzo since his arrows are relatively hard to hear and detect. The second tip is to stand your ground when you can. Did a tracer manage to warp past your entire team unnoticed only to come say hello to you? While on paper, Tracer should have the advantage, but don't underestimate the potential for headshots and scatter arrow placements. You can easily take out 200 HP heroes if you manage to land a lucky shot, so never give up if you find yourself in a one-on-one situation. This next strategy is most often needed for those with a lower knowledge of the game. Always be looking at when you're going to place your next sonic arrow, even if you just fired it. While it may last 10 seconds, that time can blink past while you're engaged in a large team fight. The worst thing you can do is have your sonic arrow up and ready to use but never fire it. It's a wasted chance and advantage for you and your team. This next tip should be pretty straightforward. Try your best to communicate and sync ultimates with your team. What does this mean exactly? Well, say there's a Zarya or a Mei on your team. If you tell them that your Dragon Strike is ready to use, they may be prompted to hold on to their ultimate for the right time, or vice versa. The final general strategy for Hanzo is to shoot in the middle of choke points. If enemies are trying to jump around a corner, don't waste time firing just before they walk into your line of sight. Shooting at the center of a choke point, preferably near the head region, will grant you more kills than you might imagine. Think about it this way, if an enemy is moving back and forth between two walls, aiming for the center is going to give you twice the chance of hitting them as aiming at one corner would. This is because they have to cross the center every time they move back and forth. The same logic can be applied in-game. Now let's go over some heroes that Hanzo counters, as well as some heroes that counter Hanzo himself. First up on the list of heroes that Hanzo stacks up well against is Torbjorn. Hanzo is great at taking out targets and deployables that are at a medium to somewhat long range. It helps even more when he's aiming for something that is 100% stationary, being a Torbjorn turret and the little Swedish dwarf hiding behind it. Next up is going to be Bastion, and the reasons are pretty much the same for Torbjorn. Bastion's main damage dealing capabilities lie within his sentry mode. This again makes him unable to move and dodge Hanzo's high damage dealing arrows. Moving on, we come to Roadhog. While he can endure a decent amount of arrows from Hanzo without worrying too much, he's just too big of a target without any movement abilities. This makes Roadhog easy pickings for most Hanzo players as long as they know to keep their distance to avoid being hooked. Finally, for the heroes that Hanzo counters pretty well, we have Zenyatta. Even with his recent tuning from Blizzard, Zenyatta still lacks the mobility required to dodge Hanzo's arrows effectively, much like Roadhog. The only difference is that Roadhog has 600 HP along with a self-heal, leaving Zenyatta at a clear disadvantage one-on-one with Hanzo. Now, let's take a look at some of the heroes you want to avoid facing off against. First, we have the combination of Genji and Tracer. I'm not putting these two heroes in separately due to the fact that they basically perform the same role, just with slightly different abilities assigned to each of them. Hanzo does not cope well with high mobility heroes, and that's just what Genji and Tracer bring to the table. While you can get lucky with a well-placed headshot or scatter arrow, most of the time these two backline harassers will make quick work of you. I find that a good strategy to go by if you find yourself being targeted by a Genji or Tracer is to try and find your way back to the middle of your team. This way, there's a better chance of you surviving due to the rest of your team helping you fight them off. Next up, we have Reinhardt. Hanzo does do great damage, but when a big fat 2000 HP shield is standing between you and your potential targets, it doesn't bode well for you. Going back to the general tips, flanking the enemy is going to be the best bet here. Thirdly, we have Widowmaker. Widow's damage is clearly superior to yours and is much easier to dish out at longer ranges compared to your petty arrows. What you should do is if you can see an enemy Widow, try to disengage and reposition to where you either have a positional or HP advantage over her. Well, thank you all for watching. I hope that this video was informative or entertaining for you. I put a lot of time and effort into making this the best it could possibly be, so if you could drop a like rating and that would help me out tremendously. Good luck on mastering Hanzo, and let me know if you want to see more hero guides in the future, but until next time, farewell.